Ukraine said this week that it has agreed to negotiate on Trump's new 28-point peace plan. Will this turn out to be just another false dawn? Or is it a sign that the war will soon end? If there's to be a deal, what would it look like? And what does it mean for your money? Wars begin when you will, but they do not end when you please. Niccolo Machiavelli famously said. What he meant is simple. Starting a war is easy. Ending one is difficult. Once set in motion, wars have a tendency to grow beyond the control of those who unleash them. This is why many wars drag on far longer than anyone initially imagines. The Iran-Iraq War lasted 8 years. The Vietnam War lasted nearly 20 years. So what does it take to end a war? Most wars end in one of two ways. One, a decisive military defeat. One side inflicting a big enough blow that the other side cannot recover from. A good example is the entering of the US into World War II that led to a total defeat of Germany. Two, a collapse of political will. The war becoming so costly that one or both sides conclude that it is no longer worth continuing. A good example is the Korean War. Public fatigue with the conflict helped Dwight Eisenhower, who campaigned on ending it, win the presidential elections of 1952. The war in Ukraine has gone on for nearly 4 years now, nearly as long as World War I, believe it or not. The million-dollar question is whether one of these two conditions for peace, a decisive defeat or an exhaustion of political will, is finally falling into place. When Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, he almost certainly did not expect the war to drag on as long as it has. Because if he had, he would have deployed far more than the roughly 150,000 troops that spearheaded what he called special military operation. Putin's planners badly underestimated Ukraine's defenses. The decapitation strike on Kiev, central to Russia's initial war plan, was both poorly conceived and even more poorly executed. Yet even this miscalculation cannot fully explain why the conflict has lasted so long. On paper, the mismatch seemed overwhelming. Russia's population is 4 times larger than Ukraine's. Its armored forces rank among the most powerful in the world, equipped with modern tanks, advanced fighter jets, and some of the most lethal artillery systems ever fielded. By any conventional metric, this should have been a second-round knockout. Instead, the war ground into a stalemate, and Moscow has been forced to conduct one mobilization drive after another, simply to keep fighting. How can we explain the stalemate? Why does the stalemate appear to be finally over? I've said in many previous videos that the Ukraine war is a proxy war between the US and Russia. Following Biden's 2020 victory, the mood in Washington shifted towards settling unfinished business with Moscow that the new administration accused of interference in both the 2016 and 2020 elections. 10 months before Russia invaded Ukraine, Biden imposed a wide array of sanctions on Russia for what he called its malign actions. 2 months before Russia invaded Ukraine, Biden told Zelensky that Ukraine's NATO membership was in its own hands. Whether it was an intentional provocation or not, Biden's backing of Ukraine's NATO aspirations, an issue Moscow has long insisted was its red line, left Putin with little choice but to take matters into his own hands. Once the war started, it became very clear very quickly that Russia was not only fighting Ukraine, but the US, indeed all of NATO too. Russia's military budget in 2021 was $66 billion. Ukraine's military budget was only $6 billion. But once the war started, Ukraine began to receive billions of dollars of military aid on top of non-military aid from the US and Europe to keep it in the fight. Between January 2022 and June 2025, it received $175 billion of military aid from the West to help it keep up with Russian military spending. One reason why the war has dragged on for so long is that the West threw a massive amount of resources into the war to help Ukraine defeat Russia. not to mention the punishing economic sanctions that they imposed on Russia to cripple Moscow's ability to sustain its war effort. Another reason why the Russian army struggled to overcome Ukrainian resistance more quickly has to do with rapid evolution of battlefield technologies. Armed with real-time Western satellite intelligence and precision strike capabilities, Ukraine was able to neutralize Russia's superior air force. Meanwhile, drones have neutralized Russian tanks. Cheap FPV drones can destroy tanks by striking weak points, engine covers, hatches, ammunition compartments, where even modern armor offers little protection. Meanwhile, reconnaissance drones expose tank movements in real time, making concealment nearly impossible. Western money and new technologies have leveled the playing field in this war and turned it into an attritional war. Ukraine's biggest problem right now is that Western funding is drying up, while Russia has adapted its battlefield strategy to counter the new technological reality of the war. Trump has said repeatedly before the 2024 elections that he could stop the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Beyond his bravado, what he really meant is that without US support, Ukraine's war effort would be difficult to sustain. This was probably also what Trump meant when he told Zelensky at their meeting in February that he didn't have the cards, and why he berated him for not being grateful enough for the US support. Under Trump, Congress has not passed any new aid packages for Ukraine. There's been a significant reduced flow of US weapons into Ukraine. Trump's plan to end the war is predicated on pulling the rug out from under Ukraine. With US support drying up, Russia's 2025 offensive has been far more successful than anything it achieved in earlier years. It took Moscow 10 months to grind its way through Bakhmut in 2023, and 8 months to seize Chasiv Yar in 2024. But over the past 6 months alone, Russian forces have taken control of most of Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, captured a large part of Seversk, completely surrounded Myrnograd, and pushing into Liman as reported earlier this week. What once took Russia the better part of a year now takes only a matter of months. If Zelensky did not immediately reject the territorial concessions in Trump's new peace proposal, it is because Ukraine's ability to defend these territories is now sharply limited. If he can no longer count on the US, it is not clear that he can count on Europe either. It must have crossed his mind whether Europe, notwithstanding its declaration of solidarity, is prepared to step up and shoulder the burden that Washington has dropped. If Europe cannot even make up its mind about turning over frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, it is pretty clear that Europe is not willing to risk a real confrontation with Russia. Zelensky has no good options right now. The most he can hope to get out at this point is an accelerated EU membership, money for rebuilding Ukraine, and a real security guarantee from the US. He will need those to sell Trump's offer to the Ukrainian people. My guess is that the EU will have to agree to taking Ukraine at the earliest opportunity. My guess is that Trump, on his part, will have to provide Ukraine with an explicit security guarantee, even if it will certainly run into opposition from his MAGA base. I'm also guessing that Putin will have to give up the territories that Russia holds in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions, in exchange for the remainder of the Donbass that he does not yet control. My final guess is that Putin will also have to agree to chip in towards the reconstruction funds for Ukraine. But Trump will make it worthwhile for him by lifting economic sanctions quickly. The Russia hawks in Washington, those who have been egging on the Ukrainians in the war, will be no doubt disappointed. But they will find consolation in the fact that by bringing Russia back into the G8, it will help drag Russia a little further from China. There's no doubt that everyone, except for the US military-industrial complex, would have been better off if the war had never started. But everyone will be worse off, except for the US military-industrial complex, if the war goes on longer. This is why I'm optimistic that the conditions are ripe for a deal. In my central scenario, the war will be winding down sometime in Q1 next year. The odds on polymarket of a ceasefire before end March is about 30% right now. I would place the odds above 50%. deal would be, of course, bearish for oil. Not only Russia would be exporting more oil when sanctions are lifted, but the geopolitical risk premium in oil will also fall. Well, this would be bullish for major oil importers like Japan and South Korea. India and China will have to pay a higher price for oil when sanctions end. A deal would be bearish also for sunflower oil, corn, and wheat. Ukraine is a major producer of these commodities, the export of which have been seriously affected by the war. A deal should be bullish for the euro and European markets. But this will depend on how quickly Europe goes back to importing cheaper gas from Russia than from the US and elsewhere. It is bearish for US LNG, but for Trump that might not be a bad thing, since this could help drive down US electricity price ahead of the US midterm elections next year. In my view, the biggest beneficiary of a deal would be Russia, whose economy has become more diversified since the war started. The end of sanctions could unleash a new Russian economy based on innovation in the strategic industries that Kremlin has nurtured in isolation. From AI-enabled military tech to autonomous drones, microelectronics, and industrial automation. Ironically, Western sanctions force Moscow to modernize in ways that it has resisted for decades. Russia will emerge from the war not only as a victor, but a stronger competitor. Even if Russia rejoins the G8, the BRICS will be stronger as a result. Thank you for listening.